Gifts. What did you get as a gift for Christmas? Did you get anything fun? Did you get anything interesting? Oh, what the gifts tell us about the giver, the receiver, and and also about where we're from. One of the things I got, and it came to be about this thick. You know, we got to stop selling Dairy Queen gift cards at $5 each. It's just, get the more expensive ones. I wouldn't have to have so I went into the Dairy Queen with a big wad of gift cards, and the manager said, give me those. I'll get them all onto one card for you. But it speaks of perhaps one thing that I might love, and you probably know by what Dairy Queen is still open about which one I probably go to. Yeah, one I forgot to frequent and it closed. But that speaks about the gift. Another gift that I received, somebody thought I wasn't having enough fun, so I got that beanbag toss game. Call that cornhole in some places. Do you have one of those? And with that, I became the coolest uncle and great uncle. Because I had a little New Year's Eve party with my family, and when you live in a large rectory, you can set one of those up in the living room and one through the double doors out into the hallway, and you can have beanbag in the house. What a fun game. And, all because they thought I should have more fun in my life. What about you? What kind of gifts did you receive? In Googling and looking, what are the top gifts from this Christmas? The Disney Princess dress-up trunk. Now, how many of you got that? Yep, perhaps speaks to the one receiving that we would see them as a princess. Or a state designation cutting board. The state of Wisconsin or whatever your favorite. Anybody get one of those for Christmas? Yeah, this pool isn't very good, evidently. But again, speaks of perhaps where we're from. Also, a custom name iPod case for your little headphone earbuds to put in there, a special little case for that. Or perhaps you got a scented candle. You're one that has an artificial Christmas tree, and that's the best you can do to get that smell of evergreen or cedar in your house. And the giver would think that. But again, we recognize again and again that sense of the gifts that come from different places, but of the giver and the receiver. If you lived in Israel, the gift you might have gotten was Dead Sea Cosmetics. Dead Sea Cosmetics. Or number 2 is anointing oil scented with myrrh. Yeah, doesn't that sound exciting? Isn't myrrh what they use when they anoint people for dying? Or olive wood carvings. We probably already have a few of those, but olive wood carvings very popular from the Holy Land area. Or if you're looking in wider Europe, maybe you could get a German nutcracker or a Nuremberg prune people. Prune people. Not sure what that is, not sure that I want one. Honey gummy bears was another option, or paprika, a well-known spice. So we realize all these different kinds of unique gifts from different places in different ways brings us to the Feast of Epiphany. So what did they bring Jesus? Where are they from? One king brought gold, symbolizing kingship, that perhaps he is a king. Frankincense was another gift, the incense of the deity, recognizing God's presence. And myrrh, the embalming oil for mere mortals, recognizing Jesus' death. What a statement they were making with those kinds of gifts. And where were these men from? Believe that by tradition, Casper is from the region of India, Balthazar from the region of Babylonian, now believed to be like the Arabia, and Melchior from the region of Persia. So we recognize them gathering from different places in different ways. And as we recognize that, we also recognize in the second reading to the Ephesians, Ephesus. So if you lived in Ephesus, what kind of Christmas gift might you expect? Nothing. It is an Arab country and they don't celebrate Christmas. Isn't that interesting? But and Ephesus is modern day Turkey today, which is basically a Muslim community. But recognizing that possibility of bringing a little bit of faith there, of people that migrate from there, as we realize people from around the world want to bring us to the sense of immigrants and migrants and refugees, people that have traveled long distances, further than just from the other side of the river in Manitowoc or from outside the county, but from around the world. Pope Francis has called us to this week of National Migration Week, and the theme of promoting a church and a world for all. promoting a church and a world for all? Are we really for all kinds of people around the world? And Pope Francis goes on to challenge, to reflect us, to be Catholics, to be inclusive and welcoming of our brothers and sisters. It is a call for unity, to stand in solidarity with and for care of those who are excluded and those who are marginalized. Pope Francis goes on to call to state that the fear is that we're beginning to build a world, a globalization of indifference. Who cares? An indifference of we no longer hear the cries of the poor, we ignore them. We turn our backs on the marginalized. We remain indifferent to those struggling to find a better way of life. That we recognize the challenge of the immigrants and the refugees around the world. And part of National Migration Week is challenging ourselves to be open to them. As the three kings came from different parts of the world, as our ancestors came to this country as migrants and immigrants, and some of them even refugees, fleeing whatever, recognize their welcome. We are challenged this week to recognize our welcome, as well as our welcome that we give to visitors, to people who are different, people that are not from our area. And with this ideal in mind, Pope Francis lays out 5 verbs, he calls it, that we be a church that welcomes, protects, promotes, integrates, and includes immigrants and refugees. Now, I could spend some good time on all 5 of those verbs, but your homework is going to be to read that in the bulletin. I'm going to lay out just 3 things to challenge you with that highlight those 3 things. Number 1 is, what is our attitude when it comes to immigrants and migrants and refugees, people that are different from us? What is our attitude inside? I remember as a young boy that there was a very negative word that were used for people of color. So if you referred to a black person years ago, you heard used a word that began with an N that was a very negative word towards them. And so our attitude, I've not heard that word in years, and we don't need to use that word, but our attitude, the attitude of people at that time, of those of us from that time, perhaps in a way was reflected in that word. What is our attitude towards those that are different from us, from those that are from other countries? What is our attitude, and how do we relate to them in our hearts? Not worried, number 1, about the words that we put out, but just what's in our heart when we encounter them. So to be people challenging that attitude, praying for always a change in that attitude, and a positive and an openness in our attitude towards immigrants and migrants and refugees. So number 1 is our attitude. Number 2 is, what is our patience? We've all been in various places where a person that's helping us, whose first language is not English, person from another country who is doing the best they can with the English language. Are we patient and understanding with them? Or do we kind of cross them off? Sometimes we get them on the phone. Sometimes we get them in the stores or many different places. How do we patiently be present to them? I remember some years ago in the school where I was, we had foreign exchange students. And one comment they made is, well, they were afraid to go to confession because they couldn't get the act of contrition in English. I said, will you just come to me and I'll let you pray it in whatever language you can pray it in. You know, again, that sense of patience, that sense of recognizing that struggle with a different language or a different culture, just being patient and understanding and open to that. And so part of this Immigration and National Migration Week is challenging our attitude and our patience. And the third is challenging our sense of hope and belief that we share for the larger world. Does that hope and belief, does that globalization affect? Is there a difference in there, or are we just indifferent to people around the world? But to challenge ourselves, to have a globalization of difference around the world, to not be ignorant of different peoples, but to be inclusive, to have that hope and belief. So as we encounter people coming to our community in search of work and a new way of life, do we share hope with them, or do we cross them off? This is our week, National Migration Week, when we want to challenge that sense of what is the hope that we put out and the hope that we share with them. And part of that hope affects us as a church. Bishop Ricken has shared with all the priests that in national numbers around the United States nationally, that by the year 2050, in 30 years from now, that our church will have more Hispanics than Anglos. So as we look around today and we count the number of Hispanics among us, the number of Latinos, and if we gather back here in the year 2030, we will be the minority. Are we ready for that? Are we open to that? Let ourselves be challenged by that sense of that hope in the future of a world, a hope that will look different from where we are today, a hope that we need to share in and that we need to grow with. We bring all this together. Where does this leave us? On the Feast of the Epiphany, gathering with these three kings from whatever country or part of the world they came from, bringing not Dairy Queen gift cards and a cornhole beanbag toss game, but bringing gifts unique to Jesus Christ, stating who he is to that infant. We are challenged in our lives about the gifts that we bring and the gifts that we share. We are challenged in this National Week of Immigrants and Migrants to recognize again and again that our ancestors, many of them were immigrants and refugees, and were welcomed. Do we continue to embrace and welcome immigrants as we should? And we challenge those three areas again: our attitude, our patience, and also our vision for our world. And so, I invite you to pray and act this week like we are not the only ones in this world. And number two, to be ready to welcome that person that comes to our door with the most unusual gift for us.